We met during college. She was sitting on the grass in the middle of campus, her books spread out around her as though she was building her own fortress of knowledge. The sunlight caught her hair, making it glow, and when she looked up, smiled, I swear I felt my heart stop. I was too nervous to approach her at first, but fate kept finding ways to push us together. Group projects, mutual friends, even a chance meeting at the coffee shop where she worked part-time. By the time I mustered up the courage to ask her out, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Our relationship was one of those rare ones where everything seemed to click. We had the same quirky sense of humor, the same love for old movies, spontaneous road trips. We could spend hours talking about everything and nothing, from philosophical debates about the meaning of happiness to which pizza topping was the best. She was my best friend, my partner in crime, and soon, the love of my life. After 3 years of dating, we moved in together. Our apartment was small and drafty, but we made it our own. We spent nights curled up on our secondhand couch, dreaming about the future we'd build together. It didn't matter that the future we'd build together. We were living off instant noodles and scraping by to pay rent. Every moment felt magical because we had each other. When I graduated, I got my first job at a small tech startup. The pay wasn't great, but it was a start. She was still finishing her degree, but was already talking about the big plans she had for her career. She was ambitious in a way that inspired me, always dreaming big and chasing after what she wanted. I admired that about her, and I felt lucky to be the person she came home to after a long day of classes and part-time work. A year later, we got married. It was a modest ceremony, just close friends and family. We didn't have much money, but we didn't need much. She walked down the aisle in a simple white dress she'd found on sale, and to me, she looked more beautiful than anyone I'd ever seen. When we exchanged our vows, I knew I was promising myself to someone who was truly special. Someone who would make life an adventure. Our early special years of marriage were like a dream. We worked hard, saved what we could, and eventually bought our first home, a small, cozy place with just enough space for the two of us. I landed a better job in tech consulting, and she found work at what she described as a high-profile office job. She often talked about her demanding boss and tight deadlines, but she never complained. She was proud of what she did, and I was proud of her. Over time, her career began to flourish. She started traveling more, attending conferences and meetings in different cities. I missed her during those trips, but I understood that it was all part of building her career. She'd always come back with souvenirs, little tokens of her travels that made me feel like I was part of her journey. At home, life was good. I worked from a home office, which gave me the flexibility to take care of the house and cook dinner most nights. She'd come home late, tired but happy, and we'd sit together at the table, sharing stories about our day. On weekends, we'd go hiking or have picnics in the park. Someday, for 7 years, our marriage felt perfect. We had built a life of love, trust, and shared dreams. I never doubted her for a moment. She was my wife, my partner, my everything. But looking back, I see now how the cracks began to form. Her trips became more frequent, her hours more unpredictable. She'd leave for 3 or 4 days at a time, sometimes even a week, always explaining that it was part of her job. I didn't question it. She was making great money, and I was proud of her success. But there were little things that didn't add up, like how she'd always delete her text messages, or how she'd sometimes laugh nervously when I asked about her coworkers. Then there was the time I joked about her staying out late. "What are you doing seeing your secret boyfriend?" I teased. I'll never forget the look on her face, how her eyes widened in shock before she quickly smiled and laughed it off. At the time, I thought I was imagining things. Now, I know better. It all came crashing down one night. Not long after her return from another business trip, my best friend stopped by for a beer, like he often did. We were sitting in the living room, talking about nothing in particular, when he pulled out his phone. "You won't believe what I stumbled across," he said, chuckling. "You've got to see this." He opened a video on one of those adult websites, grinning as the screen lit up. I wasn't paying much attention at first, but when I glanced at the screen, my blood turned to ice. There she was, my wife, smiling, laughing, and doing things that no husband should ever have to see. I couldn't speak. My heart felt like it had been ripped out of my chest. My friend, realizing what had just shown me, fumbled to close the video, filled with dozens of them. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a career, a life she'd been hiding from me. I couldn't stop myself from digging deeper. I found more videos, more evidence, more lies. And then I saw him, my best friend, in one of the videos with her. I couldn't believe it. The two people I trusted most in the world had betrayed me in ways I couldn't even comprehend. I felt like my entire life had been a lie. When she came home that night, I was waiting for her. The videos pulled up on my laptop. She froze when she saw the screen, her face pale as she realized what I knew. "Explain this," I said, my voice cold and steady. She stared at the screen, her hands trembling as she tried to form words. I can explain," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Explain," I snapped, my anger bubbling to the surface. "You can explain this? You've been lying to me for years. Not just about your job, but about everything. My voice cracked, the weight of it all crashing down on me. "You didn't just cheat on me." Down her face, but they did nothing to soften my fury. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this," she said. Offered me more than I could ever imagine, just to try it once. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So you're telling me you sold yourself, and for what money?" "It wasn't just the money," she admitted, her voice cracking. "At first it was, but then," she hesitated, and her eyes darted away from mine. "I realized I liked it. The attention, the excitement. I didn't want to stop. I felt like the room was spinning." "Liked it," I echoed, my voice dripping with disbelief. "You liked lying to me. You liked screwing other men while I sat here like an idiot, proud of the woman I thought I married." Her sobs grew louder, but I wasn't done. "And him," I pointed at the screen where my best friend's face had appeared in one of the videos. "Was that just business too, or was that something else?" She shook her head furiously. "No, it wasn't like that. He knew about it. And one day, the producers asked if I could bring someone I trusted. I swear, it wasn't personal. It was just work. Work," I repeated bitterly. "You call this work?" I pushed back from the table, unable to sit still any longer. But I pulled away. "Don't," I said coldly. "Don't touch me." For the next week, I barely spoke to her. I stayed in the guest room, avoiding her as much as possible. She tried to apologize, to explain, but I didn't want to hear it. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her in those videos. I heard her laughter, saw her smile, and it made my stomach turn. And then came the final blow. I did more digging, looking through her emails and social media accounts. That's when I found media accounts, the messages, dozens of them. Men she'd been with, men she was planning to meet, men she'd turned into regular clients. They weren't just producers or co-stars. They were paying her. And she didn't just like it, she craved it. One email stood out from the rest. It was from a doctor, confirming a diagnosis: hypersexuality, also known as nymphomania. My heart sank as I read the words. She had sought treatment before, but she had stopped going to therapy months ago. Instead, she had embraced her condition, using it as an excuse to justify everything she had done. When I confronted her with the email, she didn't even deny it. "It's not something I can control," she said, her voice hollow. "I've tried, but it's like this hunger that never goes away. I thought I could manage it, but it just got worse." "So you gave up," I said. "You gave up on me, on us, because it was easier to let it consume you." "I didn't want to hurt you," she said, her eyes pleading. "I thought I could keep it separate. I thought you'd never find out." "Well, you were wrong," I said bitterly. "And now, I can't even look at you without feeling sick." She begged me to stay, to give her another chance, but I was done. I packed my things and left that night, taking only what I needed. I didn't even tell her where I was going. I just drove until the sun came up, trying to leave the pain behind. Months passed, and I tried to rebuild my life. I traveled from city to city, taking on odd jobs and living out of cheap motels. Holding hands, I heard a familiar laugh. I was reminded of her. She tried to contact me a few times, sending long messages about how she was getting help, how she was trying to change. But I didn't reply. I didn't care anymore. Her words, "I didn't care anymore," meant nothing to me. The last I heard, she was still working in the industry, unable or unwilling to break free. Her addiction had consumed her, leaving her trapped in the life she had chosen. And me, I was still wandering, still searching for something to fill the void she left behind. Maybe one day I'll find peace. Maybe one day I'll learn to trust again. But for now, all I have is the road ahead, and the hope that I can leave the past. And a hope that I can leave the past behind me. Months turned into years, but the pain never fully left me. It clung to my thoughts, creeping in during quiet moments and ambushing me in my dreams. Spiraled deeper into her addiction, becoming more entrenched in the industry. What little savings we had built together vanished, spent on therapy she wouldn't stick to, or lavished on meaningless luxuries meant to numb her emptiness. I couldn't stop myself from wondering if she even felt regret. Did she ever look back at the life we had built and mourn what she had destroyed? Or had the thrill of her secret life eclipsed everything else? I hated myself for caring, but the questions gnawed at me all the same. My life became a blur of movement. I wandered through Europe, Asia, even parts of South America. I worked odd jobs, bartending, teaching English, fixing computers, anything to keep my mind occupied, to prevent the memories from resurfacing. I didn't talk much about my past. People I met assumed I was just a traveler, a free spirit searching for adventure. I let them believe it because the truth was too heavy to share. One evening, in a small bar tucked away in Bangkok, I met a man who recognized her. He didn't know who she was to me, of course. To him, she was just another face from the internet. He started talking about a video he'd seen, about how beautiful and uninhibited she was. I felt my chest tighten, the familiar mix of anger and sorrow rising within me. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "I think I've seen her before." Me shaken. No matter how far I traveled, no matter how many miles I put between us, the ghost of her choices followed me. She was everywhere, in the faces of strangers, in the whispers of a world that seemed determined to remind me of what I'd do. Lost. A year later, I found myself back in the States, living in a quiet coastal town where no one knew my name. I rented a small room above a diner, spending my days fishing and my nights working in the kitchen. It was a simple life, free from the chaos and betrayal that had once defined me. For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of peace. But peace has a way of being interrupted. One evening, as I was closing up the diner, a woman walked in. Her hair was shorter than I remembered, her face thinner, but I knew it was her the moment our eyes met. My breath caught in my throat as she approached the counter, her expression a mix of nervousness and determination. "I've been looking for you," she said, her voice softer than I remembered. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Seeing her there after all this time was like reopening an old wound. "Please," she said, sitting down at the counter. "I just need a few minutes." Reluctantly, I nodded, leaning against the counter as she began to speak. She told me about the years we'd spent apart, about how she had finally committed to therapy, how she was working on herself, how she had left the industry, and was trying to rebuild her life. "I know I hurt you," she said, tears glistening in her eyes. "I know I ruined everything, but I need you to know that I'm sorry, truly sorry." Her words were sincere, but they didn't erase the pain. They didn't undo the nights I spent alone, the betrayal that had shattered me. "I don't hate you," I said finally, my voice low and steady. "But I can't forgive you either. Not because I don't want to, but because I don't know how." She nodded, her shoulders sagging as if she had expected my answer. "I understand," she said. "I just needed to tell you. To try." With that, she stood and walked out, leaving me alone in the quiet diner. I didn't stop her. I didn't follow. She was a part of my past, a chapter I had no desire to revisit. Over the next few weeks, I tried to shake off the encounter. I told myself it didn't matter, that she didn't matter. But deep down, I knew the truth. She would always be a part of me, a scar I carried no matter how far I traveled. Eventually, I left the coastal town, moving on to another place, another life. The road became my home, a constant reminder that I was searching for something I might never find. Freedom, peace, forgiveness. It all felt just out of reach. As for her, I heard whispers through old friends. She was still struggling, still battling the addiction that had consumed her. Some said she was getting better. Others claimed she had relapsed. I didn't ask for details. I didn't want to know. I'd like to say I found closure, that I moved on and built a new life. But the truth is, some wounds never fully heal. Some stories don't have happy endings. And so I keep wandering, one foot in front of the other, hoping that somewhere along the way, I'll find a place where the past no longer haunts me.